Welcome to Sectors Up Close. I'm Elena Casas. Today we're talking about greening Europe's transport systems, and my guest is Joachim Klement, Head of Strategy at Liberum Capital. The European Union has set a target of cutting 90% of transport emissions by 2050, and that will require substantial cash. It's coming from the Connecting Europe facility, a mix of government funding from member states, public-private partnerships and the European Investment Bank. It has about 20 billion euros in grants yet to be assigned. Good news for sustainable rail technology, green electricity and the industrial firms building that infrastructure. European industrials are already up 11.4% year to date, compared to 6.7% for the wider Stoxx 600. But could the green transition turbocharge this? To find out, I'm joined now by Joachim Klement of Liberum Capital. Joachim, hi. Just a few years ago, European states did not talk about industrial policy. The green transition seems to have brought it back in a big way. Why?
There are all kinds of reasons, but number one is the changing geopolitical landscape. We're much more aware of the competition with China and, since the Trump presidency, also of the possibility of potential trade conflicts with the US. The end result is that first the US with its Inflation Reduction Act and the Chips and Science Act in 2022, and now the EU are engaging more and more in industrial policies to finance these huge investments necessary to make us fit for the 21st century.
We've heard a lot about the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act and the huge investment within it for these companies in the US. How does the European spending compare?
In terms of absolute size, it's almost the same, $780 billion in subsidies and grants from the Inflation Reduction Act in the US. In Europe, the Green New Deal is about $600 billion US dollars, but the European economy is also slightly smaller than the US. So in terms of relative to the economy, they are neck and neck.
So, how much will European industrial manufacturers benefit? The money isn't ring-fenced for European companies, is it?
No, officially there is no ring-fencing that you can only get this money if you are a European company. But given the political environment and the political climate, it seems very likely that the vast majority of it will go to European businesses. And if American businesses or Chinese businesses or Japanese businesses want to get a piece of the cake, they probably have to go into a joint venture with a European company.
So, which industrial giants stand to benefit the most?
Well, if we're talking about the trans-European networks, there are 3 different trans-European networks that are being financed and built right now. One on transport, one on communication, and one on energy. And when it comes to the transport, it's pretty much all going into railway networks and high-speed rail. And if we're talking about that, then it is the big infrastructure companies, the big construction companies in Europe, most importantly Vinci in France, Europe's largest construction company, but even more so Ferrovial, the Spanish company, which is a specialist in railway construction.
If we talk about actually building trains, there are 2 big players here, Germany's Siemens and France's Alstom. How do they fare against one another?
Both are huge conglomerates, both have very good products, and it will eventually be something like a national champion kind of thing, where in France, Alstom will probably have the edge over Siemens, while in Germany, Siemens will have the edge over France. Most of the investments in those trans-European networks for transport go to Germany, Poland and France. And there, I would say it's really on average a split 50-50. They will probably kind of get both about the same amount of financial aid from governments.
What about electrifying car transport and building out charging networks? There's money in this for that as well, isn't there? So who benefits there?
Yes, and the companies that benefit there are, on the one hand, again, Siemens and these kind of industrial companies that provide the chargers and build the chargers. Siemens Mobile is a subsidiary that helps there. But also some energy companies. Iberdrola, for example, the big Spanish electricity company, has been the biggest beneficiary from EU grants to build a Spanish network of charging stations for electric cars.
So, how can investors benefit?
Well, Ideally, you would actually go for Ferrovial as the classic pure play exposure if you want to go for a single stock. Otherwise, the construction sector overall has been doing extremely well. After being kind of very lackluster and overall not a very exciting sector for many years, over the last 3 months it has topped the charts, just a little bit behind the semiconductors.
And are there ESG concerns here? Because obviously the main part of the work of companies like Vinci is still building major highways.
Yes, which is why Vinci is a bit of a disadvantage, definitely from an ESG perspective, because it is focused mostly on airports and highways and roads. This is where, again, Ferrovial, Alstom, etc. have a big advantage because they are explicitly focusing on green infrastructure.
Joachim Klement of Liberum Capital, thank you so much for joining us. Well, that's your roundup of the European green transport sector. I'm Elena Casas, and this is Reuters.